The XC-142 is in the museum's Global Reach Gallery, and it tested another form of vertical takeoff and landing technology called tilt wings. And tilt wings operate with the engines attached to the wings, and the entire wing goes vertical. And the XC-142 was actually very successful in testing, but it wasn't bought and made operational. And it's a great illustration of the problem that we face called the Valley of Death. And that's where there's a system that works well in test, but ultimately is not bought by the acquirer or fielded by the warfighter. And AFRL has different means that we're trying to prevent the Valley of Death problem. One of those is through the Integrated Capabilities Directorate, where they're pairing warfighters, science and technology folks, and acquirers to make sure that the systems that we're developing, the technology we're developing, can be applied, bought, and fielded. This is a pulse detonation engine developed in AFRL in the 2000s, and it's pretty amazing. They're fairly simple engines, but very difficult to control. A typical engine uses something called deflagration. This actually used detonation, or basically a series of controlled explosions. And PDEs are simpler and fuel efficient, but again, very difficult to develop. Now, this particular PDE used a standard car engine block, and it was used to power the first airborne aircraft to use a PDE. Now, there's parallel technology to pulse detonation called rotating detonation engines, or RDEs, and both PDEs and RDEs are being developed in AFRL today. We're at the C-141 Starlifter, and this was an important Air Force strategic airlifter used in the 1960s all the way into the 1990s and even into the 2000s. And the C-141 was powered by low bypass turbofans. And basically that just means that the volume of air traveling around the engine, through the fan and around the engine, was not a very high ratio compared to the air that was going through the engine itself. Now, there was a huge leap forward with the development of the high bypass turbofan. And we have the very first one used operationally and produced in the T-39 high bypass turbofan, right behind me here. And this large structure at the front is the fan, and that's a key part of a turbofan. You can see it's huge. And the reason why it's so big is because actually for every part of air that goes through this engine, 8 parts go past the engine. So all the air goes through the fan, but much of the air actually bypasses the engine itself, hence the name high bypass turbofan. High bypass turbofans have unparalleled fuel efficiency compared to other types of turbine engines. And in fact, these TF-39s are the reason why the C-5, the huge Galaxy strategic airlifter, was possible. And commercial versions of this TF-39 have been used on large airliners even to this day. So chances are if you've flown on a big airliner, it was powered by the commercial version of this TF-39. So where are the labs in this? Well, the labs championed this idea of creating a high bypass turbofan in the 1960s. A lot of people thought they weren't possible because high bypass turbofans absolutely require higher heats, higher temperatures, which is a real materials and structure problem. Well, Cliff Simpson, an irascible pioneering engineer in the labs, developed scale models of turbofans, and then also the labs developed key cooling technology called film cooling, which allowed the high heats required for the high bypass turbofan.
This concludes our tour of the National Museum of the U.S. Air Force.